This is Melanie Cosentino with Columbia Happenings, and today we're at Florida Gateway College, where we are going to have the extreme pleasure of watching Highwayman artist R.L.Lewis create a painting.
First, tell me a little bit about the artist series. What we're doing here today. What is
this artist series today is a part of the Olusty program celebrating at the college. It's also Black History. The college has also been a collector of Highwayman work and have several of the pictures. And it's one of those that didn't cost too much when they bought them, but they started to get more and more expensive, and they're now in the thousands of dollars.
We are thankful to be here. I am Robert L. Lewis III, and you are to my left. The gentleman to my left is Robert L. Lewis Jr., also known as an original Florida Highwayman artist. Now, that is the nickname given to black Florida landscape painters from the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. These artists marketed the sale of their art to banks, attorneys, businesses. They essentially weren't allowed in museums or galleries during their day, so they took their art directly. The nickname gave the art an identifiable name, and it gave it a reason to be collected. These artists gained their fame as Florida landscape painters, so it had great crossover appeal with its predominantly white audience for the most part. He always says to me that a gift is meant to be shared. Another side note is that when you look at art and art history, we could probably say that this particular class of artists, we remember one of the artists, I'll let him remain anonymous. In 2001, an awful lot of things start to take place as it relates to these artists being allowed in museums, galleries. Let's find out. And over time, started getting invited to functions. And I had a lot going for myself. Some of you guys, the first thing that he mentioned was the artwork I had on the wall, and at that time at a place called Max and Meg's. A large group of the artists from Fort Pierce didn't know one another. Then you had a different contingency. You have actually, even in art class, artists that tend to associate, tend to paint the same. It really wasn't art for the sake of art for some. It was more or less art for the sake of survival. They discovered an entrepreneurial venture for some of them. The crown, the broad nails, and the different methods to the madness all came. He always looks at him. What position did you play art class to get the elective credit? While there, you encounter like you'll drive through Brevard like some of the other counties, the big surrounding area county. She taught part-time, you could say, in our own respects. She was directly on the Indian River Lagoon system, and he grew up with 6 sisters. He didn't do math well. I don't think he did anything well academically. What he did is actually acrylic. It's an acrylic demonstration, but the same concept technique that you, the wet on wet is where you shellac or prep the board. As it relates to the Highwayman, what the artist painted had white in the background or backdrop. There's one of the artists, I was watching him do a demo the other day at an event we were at, and if you paint oil indoors, you got to make sure that it's kind of like 3 years later, he said he got a chance to know who Cezanne was and Rembrandt, and as a matter of fact, he says he goes out of his way to make sure he uses the shading of light and dark in paintings. Never really paints a dark painting because he says where there's darkness there should be some. From that particular point, wound up heading back south to Florida. He is a Florida native. There was always somebody available to buy a landscape. He was a young artist, attempted school for a semester or two, but thereafter, if he could paint Buster the Wonder Dog. He always had this dog on TV with the cape on it. And 25 males and 1 female. Mary Ann Carroll is the only of the original Highwayman artist that's a female. This particular book comes out, and the artists are showing up at how difficult it is building a Black American art wing onto the Smithsonian. And it's been serious talk about these artists christening a Florida house in D.C. And it's full of, first thing that will greet you coming into the door is an array of Highwayman art all over the place.
And when I do that, I make something more than what imagination. See, your only limitation is your imagination.